Immerse us into an experience that may transform our lives. Find solace in the pages unfolding a saga for us. The magic that books weave will leave us asking for more, and the impact they have on us is everlasting. Our reading project is a carefully curated endeavor with its main aim to promote a love for reading. During the project, we get to explore new genres of English and Hindi literature and go beyond our textbooks and widen our horizons. And while we inculcate a love for reading, we also imbibe important skills of visualizing, questioning, inferencing, and synthesizing in order to have the wholesome experience that one undergoes while enjoying a good book. May I now invite our fellow students, Shaurya Miglani and Punya Puri, to give you a sneak peek into Get Booked, the reading project at NIBS for grade 1 to 11.
Here at NIBS, we truly believe that there is no such thing as a person who does not enjoy reading. They just haven't found their favorite book yet.
True. And that's exactly why we expose the students at NIBS to different fields of literature across all age groups so that they may find their perfect fit.
Yes, reading, they say, is a passport to countless adventures. And our young readers at junior school hop onto this trail by exploring the world of colorful imagery with Dr. Seuss books.
As they laugh their hearts out over humorous rhymes and quirky illustrations, they are taken in for a deeper dive into the realm of brave knights and fearless princesses with fairy tales next.
Absolutely, with stories of Hansel and Gretel and the Valiant Tailor and many, many more. Their eyes are lit bright with the hope of a happy ending. Our young readers sure do enjoy this magical ride, don't they?
Sure, they do. As their feet grow bigger and curiosity doubles its speed, they are introduced next to an alternate world where animals talk and teach. Yes, with fables such as The Lion and the Fox and The Peacock and the Crane, they unleash the wisdom of the ages in an engaging way and build a foundation that shapes their lives ahead.
From the land of stories, they steer next towards poetry, where they witness language, words, and art at play. While they learn about voice, pitch, and intonations with poems such as The Sound Collector, Being Brave at Night, they also begin seeing poetry as a medium of expression.
And then, equipped with all the tools, our young readers embark next to explore the genre of classic novels in their junior years. As they meet Alice in Wonderland or cross the bridge to Terabithia, they meet and discover different characters, understand their unique backgrounds, and learn to empathize, which not only makes them good readers, but good human beings.
Yes, and that's how we get booked at junior school. Grade 6 is introduced to the world of informational text. They plow through the tracks of Tell Me Why series and National Geographic books as they quench their curiosity with the whys and hows of the world around them.
The world of fiction opens its doors to the students of class 7, wherein they begin to analyze characters, settings, themes, and plots.
Fiction, being such an expansive field of literature, helps students explore its numerous categories of mystery, romance, science fiction, and fantasy. The texts vary from The War That Saved My Life to The Boy in Striped Pajamas.
The inspiring stories of world personalities like Aaron Ralston, Abhinav Bindra, Malala Yousafzai, and Maria Sharapova await children in grade 8, wherein they are introduced to biographies and now autobiographies.
I believe struggles are an integral part of all our lives. And the reason why young people should read biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, and diaries is because they provide the most valuable lessons in life, enlightening our young readers by providing a peek into how these great men and women made their way on the stage of life.
Do you enjoy poetry? Well, here's a poem I composed. Roses are red, skies are blue. I am scared of poetry, and I hope so are you.
What? You must be joking. Didn't you experience the reading project in grade 9?
Of course, I'm joking. Well, I was scared of poetry till grade 8. But then I got hooked and booked by poetry during the course of reading project in grade 9. As I explore the world of Wordsworth, Shakespeare, Vikram Seth, and Emily Dickinson.
I still remember how I realized that every poem is indeed an unfolding bud that seems unattractive at first glance, but gradually begins to reveal its beauty, provided we are patient and appreciative. Our students of grade 9th are introduced to the various elements of poetry and the art of appreciating poetry during the reading project.
Finally, we find the treasure called the one-act plays in grade 11. I never thought that reading a play would be so much fun.
Yes, and what amuses me even more are the technicalities of the one act play, with its plot structure, free tax pyramid, limited characters, unity of time and space, and so much more.
Honestly, next time I visit the library, the first shelf on my radar will be the one with the collection of one-act plays.
As Stephen King says, books are a uniquely portable magic. And as we turn a page and step into this new dimension of virtual learning, we are dreaming bigger than before, being enriched through our magical experiences. Once again, a very warm welcome to you all to our second virtual Booked by the Nib webinar. We hope you enjoy the sessions lined up for you. Our first panelist is Ms. Aparna Raman. Ms. Aparna Raman is a writer, educator, storyteller, creative writing facilitator, and the founder of Timbuktu Young Authors Publishing, India's first by kids, for kids publishing platform. Timbuktu has launched over 250 young authors across the world. Aparna ma'am is a regular speaker at LitFests such as the Bengaluru Literature Festival, Bukaru, Kala Ghoda, Lulu Cochin, Makkalakuta, Mango Litfest Surat, just to name a few. Ma'am has worked with Ririti to curate children's workshops at museums and is the founder of Storylines, an initiative that encourages the archival of family histories. Through her community-oriented Timbuktu Hope vertical, Aparna ma'am has written 3 books for children, parents, and educators that encourage inclusiveness and acceptance. The latest, My World of Wonder, was launched at the Vizag Festival. The Moon Who Wanted to Be the Sun was launched at Kaleido Lit Fest. As a faculty member at the Shrishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bengaluru, Aparna ma'am facilitates courses on communication and information design. Her areas of interest are branding, narratives, storytelling, visual culture, media and communication, and human-computer interaction. She is working on designing community outreach programs and rural education interventions. She is also a Kathalist certified storyteller. We welcome you to NIBS, ma'am. For our audience, if you have any questions, you are requested to post them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Thank you. Please sit back and enjoy.
Thank you so much for that introduction.
Ma'am, can you switch off the other device?
There's an echo because of the other device. I think we'll have to switch off one device. Thank you. Ma'am, if you could unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ishwar, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. So, Jugnu ma'am, would you like me to begin?
Surely, ma'am, please.
Okay, so hi everyone again. As Ishwar mentioned, my name is Aparna, and I'm welcoming you to this talk on my reading program, which is centered around books, developing reading skills from a young age, and also seeing the advantages of reading in terms of the impact it has on our vocabulary. So the first thing I would like all of you all to sort of take away from this conversation is that a lot of people think of English as a subject in school. And I would like you all to walk away from this interaction by believing that this is not a subject, and reading is not limited to developing English skills as a subject in school that you've got to pass and that you've got to do well in. English actually, and reading and writing, are life skills nowadays, which you will need lifelong. So even when you go into the workplace, you are going to have, those with reading and writing skills can be more imaginative in the work that they do, in the way they communicate, generally in the way they present themselves. So all of you who are listening today, I'd like you to remember that. So reading, writing, and English are not just about stories. It does not finish when you finish school. It is a lifelong process. Right. So very quickly, how did I get into Timbuktu, and why am I so convinced and passionate about it? So it is a publishing house, and it is primarily driven at the purpose that drives it is to enhance reading and writing skills. So I run creative writing workshops throughout the year, and very often I use books that are topical, that are related to interests, that are related to themes like environment, like ecology, children, grief, loss, mythology, gender. A lot of themes that children should be exposed to, and there's nothing like picking up a book and reading to actually get a sense of, to get a real and living sense of what the theme is about and how does it impact our lives. The best way to explain anything to a child is through a book. And nowadays, a lot of people are specifically doing that. It is time of the coronavirus. There's a high level of anxiety. There are a lot of books out there that can explain in an extremely sensitive manner, themes such as grief, such as loss, such as anxiety. And in fact, for all the times that we live in and we pass through, there is a book for it. So all you have to do is reach out. There are a lot of reading books online. Your teachers in school can help you out. If there is something that a subject that you want to engage with, I would suggest that you reach out for a book, and I'm happy to always help you. So I started, with a creative writing class some years ago, around 8 years ago, because I believe that children are the most creative. And believe it or not, I am over here talking to all of you, but I firmly believe that it should be the other way around. And that's what my experience actually has been. I learn so much from children. That is a disruption that I want all of you all to take away with you today and think about it. The kind of insights that all of you all are capable of is something that adults actually are not. We are very, very conditioned. But at your age, you're still fresh, especially the younger ones amongst you. You're very fresh. You are unconditioned. You have a very unique take on books and reading. And your view of life and creativity and some of the ideas that you all come up with are very, very novel, which is why I realized that there has to be some way of documenting the stories and the ideas that children come up with. because they are so, so unique. And I want to create this market where children read what other children are reading and writing. So that is a world library that I'm working towards, where, you know, a child in Delhi, where you are, for instance, can read what a child in Gujarat, in Sri Lanka, in Dubai, anywhere in Africa is reading. Why not? You can inspire one another, right? And that is a world library that I'm. Now, the next point I want to come to is, so that is how net, that is how I started Timbuktu, because I realized that it's very important to document and archive the ideas and writing and reading that children are doing. So I publish child authored books, and it's extremely unique. You know, they are unique, you are unique, and that is a market that I'm trying to build. That is what Timbuktu is about. However, I'm also a creative writing facilitator, and that is where I work with books and reading, and I cannot stress enough the importance of that. There is a Word Wizards program where I ensure that every term children learn about at least 30 to 50 new words per term. And that is possible through reading. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about the whole aspect of creativity. That, okay, you read, but when it comes to translating the ideas and the words that sort of, you know, develop in your mind from reading, you know, think of it as a sort of an invisible process where you're reading, the words sort of in this invisible process get embedded in your mind. You don't always know that it's there. You don't see this process happening. It's very seamless. But suddenly one day when you are told to write something, there is a way, and I firmly believe in it, those thoughts just magically disentangle, and they again align themselves in such a way that they make sense and you are able to articulate. That is where your vocabulary comes from reading. And when you're finally able to actually articulate it on paper, you will be so glad that you actually. So illustrate this point better, that this is where ideas come from. I would like to have a little engagement with some of you. Could I please request the panelists to return, and if it's possible to switch on their cameras. Of course, is for everyone to, everyone can give this a shot if you have a piece of paper and pen or pencil in front of you. So if the panel, and if you're ready, then I'm ready. Okay. Remember, this is not a pressure situation. Go with the flow and just come up with your first ideas. It's just supposed to be fun and spontaneous. Don't spend too much time thinking. Okay. Now, children, I'm going to give you 5 words. Okay. You can take them down or you can remember it, whatever you like. Volcano, that's the first one. Mirror, the second one. Circus clown, that's the third one. Forest, that's the fourth one. The last one is jewel. Okay, now shall I repeat it for everybody? 1, volcano. 2, mirror. 3, circus clown. 4, forest. And 5, jewel. Can anyone guess now what you're supposed to do with these 5 words?
Create a story out of it.
That's right, Ishwar. Yes, Punya, you had your hand raised as well? Same thing?
Yes.
Okay, good. So now you can see how disparate or different these words are. Okay, at the first glance, there may not be anything, there may not even be like a segue or some sort of association between the words. But that's what makes you creative. You would have engaged with each of these different words in different stories. And that would have sparked off different associations in your mind. Very quickly, without giving it too much of a thought, can you all quickly string these words together to come up with a story idea in 2 sentences? Yes, Gurleen, you have your hand up already?
Yes, I already thought of that. So,
Great.
according to me, like my character will be an alien which has come from Mars, and he has dressed himself up as a circus clown.
Okay.
And there, when he comes to the Earth, he puts up a forest around the volcano, and there he sets up a big mirror, and that is how the people of Earth get to know that there are aliens on Mars.
Okay. Great.
That is my story idea.
Jewel and mirror.
All right. Yes. I forgot. Like on the mirror, he puts a big, huge, giant jewel, and that is when the people of Earth understand that this is a signal from Mars.
So on the mirror, he hangs a jewel, is it? I see. And the jewel is some sort of a sign. It means something.
And it is magical. It is something we've never seen before. And that is my idea.
Very nice. Now, very quickly, Gurleen, can you mention any kind of books? Now, you may have been very young when you have, but if you can remember, it would be great to inspire your younger, school students. Any books that sparked off these thoughts? How were you able to come up with this so quickly? It's a result of reading, whether you know it or not.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. So there was a book I read. It said some kind of courage, and the story is about a boy who goes on a journey, and there he finds a dropped jewel, and that is how he associates that, yes, it is a sign for me to find his horse.
Exactly.
So that is where the idea of jewel came from.
Exactly. So a jewel is not necessarily a jewel. It could be a symbol or a metaphor for something else. Yeah. And that is something that is lodged in your memory, and unconsciously you recall it only because of reading. Okay. Thank you so much, Gurleen. That was helpful. Anyone else, please share your idea. I want to see Punyat. Yes. Thank you. Your hand is raised.
Okay, so my story is that a clown was walking through the forest to look for apples for his next juggling act in the circus. Walking through the forest, he comes across this really big enchanted mirror. So he decides to touch it, and as he touches it, he finds himself in the middle of a volcano, inside a volcano. And inside the volcano, there are thousands of diamonds and a lot of jewels, and now he's rich and he doesn't have to be a clown anymore.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last sentence. After he finds the jewels?
He's rich. He takes all the jewels, and now he doesn't have to be a clown anymore.
I see. Yes, nice. I really like the fact that you saw the mirror not just as a mirror, but it is a portal. Yeah. From the mirror, he goes into the volcano, right? So that is a journey, like the hero's journey. Yeah. So once again, you have employed a metaphor. The mirror is not just a mirror. Have you seen the line, The Witch in the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis? It was a movie. So even over there, you should check it out. Even over there, the wardrobe is not just a wardrobe. So these kids open the cupboard, and then they go out into a place where they meet the lion and a witch and a whole lot of adventures. So, unconsciously, the hero's journey becomes embedded in our minds, and it manifests in your expressions. Yeah, nice. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone from the audience also? You're welcome to.
I think Shaurya has a story.
Shaurya, yes.
It's a pretty basic one. I just made it up. So So there were three friends. There were three friends who were wandering for, who were urging for, were thirsting for an adventure. So they decided to go up to a volcano, which was actually an active volcano. So one of the friends was Kathy. So she was this fashionable girl who always likes to, fix her makeup. So she over there on an active volcano, she was trying to fix her makeup, looking at the mirror, and the makeup was a little too much, and everybody started calling her a circus clown, circus clown. Now, Kathy, being how she is, she got so fed up that she ran away to the forest. While she was running away to the forest, her friends realized that she might get lost. So all three of them were running towards her, and while running towards the forest, she falls down a hole where they discover the secret world of which is a secret place which is full of jewels.
Like a cave. Very nice. I really like the fact that once again you have used this aspect of transformation, and the transformation that you have used is the fact that Kathy, you've not actually used a clown, but Kathy becomes the clown. So it's almost like shape shifting, So I want, Shaurya, I want you also to keep in mind about where these ideas have been triggered from, the kind of reading that you've done in the past. Okay? Why is this activity important? Can anyone tell me? It's the same 5 set of words that's been given to everybody. And yet, can you all see how diverse your stories are? And that brings me back to the quotation that your school has wonderfully placed on your communication for this event. No two people read the same book. Now, do you understand how that has actually played out amongst you all in your own experience? Yeah. So look at the same set of 5 words, but all of you all who are different individuals have responded differently to it. Okay, anyone else who'd like to jump in?
Amal.
Yes, Ishwar.
My story starts with a man who lives a very normal life. But one day he wakes up and he looks at himself in the mirror and he realizes he's dressed up exactly like a circus clown. But when he looks at himself, like normally, he seems perfectly fine. But as he goes out into the world, he realizes other people are also seeing him as a circus clown. So he starts having a sort of existential crisis and he just decides to run wherever he can to get away from the world and so that people can't see him like this. And he goes into a forest and he finds this old man who actually tells him that the reason you look like a circus clown right now is because of a certain jewel that is hidden in a volcano. You will need to go into the volcano and get that jewel to me and I can fix it. So he goes to the volcano and he finds the jewel. But what he realizes when he gets back to the old man is the old man has been tricking him this entire time. The jewel is not just something that lays down a curse. It is something that can make reality whatever you want it to be. So if, for example, he wanted to be looking normal and not like a circus clown, he'd do that. He'd be able to do that. So he realizes for the betterment of humanity that the best course of action to do is to destroy the jewel. So he decides on his way back to destroy the jewel and embraces his life as a circus clown because he gets to entertain children at their birthday parties.
Very nice. Very imaginative, Ishwar. Also, maybe he feels that the jewel is actually about deception, right? So once again, things are not what they seem, right? All of you have proven that. The jewel is finally about deception. Maybe it's offering you parallel realities and universes, but maybe that's not what you want. You want what is authentic to you. Very well. All of you. Have we left out anyone? Anyone else wants to jump in? I can see Lippy, Catherine, Kabir, Abhimanyu. Okay, only if you want to, no pressure.
Xenia has raised her hand.
Xenia, yeah, hi. Go ahead.
My story is about a person who gets trapped in a dream, and in the dream, all their worst fears their dream turns into a nightmare because all their worst fears kind of are included in the dream, and they can't escape it. So
Mhm.
basically, a circus, as they go into the dream, they think it's just like anybody would think a dream is reality. So they get scared, like where am I? They get spawned
Mhm.
in like forest, and then they see a circus clown following them, and they've always been afraid of circus clowns, so they start running.
Mhm.
As they start running, they come into this big cave, and there are a lot of rocks nearby. So they go into the cave and they try placing the rocks in such a way that the circus clown can't jump over them. And then inside the cave, they find a lot of mirrors, but you can walk through the mirrors. So they walk through one of them, only to find them in a completely different place. This place is kind of like an island with the volcano in it, and they've always also been scared of fire. So they go there, and then when the volcano starts erupting, they start running away. But then they find that a lot of jewels are coming out of the volcano instead of fire,
Ah,
and
nice.
then
Hmm.
they take the jewels, thinking it's real life, and they try swimming in the ocean, and that's when they wake up. But the thing is, that the jewels are still with them.
Hmm. Right. I would suggest it's a great story. I would suggest not bringing in the dream. I know a lot of young people are very fond of the dream as a device, but I would suggest not having the dream as a device. Just make it real. Yeah, like your story. I find it great that you played with so many different landscapes, topographies. There's an island, there's a sea, there's a volcano. I love the fact that you have jewels coming out of the volcano. So once again, the jewel is not so much of a jewel, but it is fire. Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. So how do you think that you all got all these ideas and metaphors? You have to look back, and I want all of you all to maybe write a reflective note about this after this talk and share it with your teachers. Looking back on the story that all of you all have spoken about so spontaneously, it had to have come from somewhere. And without knowing, the hero's journey is an archetype in all stories. All stories have the same process. There's the hero, he's going out on a journey, he has obstacles, there are supporters, there are shapeshifters, there are deceivers, and then he goes towards a goal. So look back, do this reflection, and share it with your teachers. I would be very happy to receive it as well, and I'll connect with your teachers on that. Great. So now, very quickly, I want to spend another 5 minutes on the kind of reading that I think that how can you get the most out of reading? So it's great to read a book. You can be completely spontaneous about it, that I've read a book, I've put it away, your brain does the processing. That is a fact, it's a scientific fact. However, if you would like to be like a little more painstaking about it, or if you would like to introduce a process where you get the most out of it, what I do in my Word Wizards program is I encourage children to write down the words, the new words that they are learning. So that is a way of going about it. Keep a vocabulary journal with you. And even if you're traveling, take a diary and a pencil or a pen with you. Keep sketching, keep observing the outside world. And that's where ideas come from. And then you can connect it to books that you've read. Okay. When we were talking about the circus and somebody mentioned the magic forest, doesn't that remind you of the enchanted forest, those of you who've read Enid Blyton? Okay. So be aware of these sources of inspiration wherever you go. So coming back to the vocabulary journal, jot down the words that you don't know. Look them up in the dictionary. Learn how to use those words properly. And learn to apply them in sentences. And develop a love for words. And that's when books will immediately sort of lure you. There'll be a sort of a natural attraction to books. You can create beautiful word clouds, beautiful mind maps. As and when you read, you can jot down these beautiful words. And each of them opens up a sort of a world of their own. Imagine beautiful concept words like forest. What is a forest? Is it only about trees and woods and wild animals? What can it be a metaphor for? What can the ocean be a metaphor for? What are the feelings and emotions associated with stories that are about forests, that are about oceans? Absolutely fascinating. What does a mountain mean to you? Yeah. What does being in a forest mean to you? So that is something, that's a reading that I encourage. That's what I encouraged with a reading. Another activity that you all can do is try and find a connection between unlike things, like today's activity. Think laterally. Think laterally. For instance, all of you have learned about aches. If I asked you, like, oh, how's your headache? And you say, oh, okay, the headache is gone. And I may ask you, so where is your headache gone? Is that an opportunity for a story? Do you know what I'm saying? Where do aches go when they are gone? Yes? Do we ever think about those things? We all say the ache has gone. Now, is there an opportunity for a story there? So look around you. Always be on the lookout for stories. They are all around us. So yes, they are in books, but there are ways you can exercise your imagination when you do not necessarily have a book with you, right? Then your environment becomes the book. And your mind has to work as a camera, continuously keep clicking those pictures, storing them here, and recalling them when you need a story. Okay. When I was very young and I was growing up in an apartment block, I saw a man climbing up the opposite block. He climbed up and then went into his open balcony. And I was thinking, why can't he just take the elevator? If the elevator is not working, why can't he take the stairs? Do you understand now why observation is very, very important? There is a story over there. Why does a man need to enter his own house by climbing up through, the front edifice of the house, up the drain pipe or whatever it is? Why does he need to do that? There is a story there. So look around you for stories. And that is where you will find inspiration. Okay, so yes, get your nose into a book, but more importantly, develop your imagination through observation. So even when a book is not in front of you, you become the book because you develop the narrative in your mind. All right. So I think I'm going to take some questions now because it's 4:44. And in those questions, I would like to address aspects like book recommendations, what you all are reading, you can share with me, and I will give you my tips on what I think you should be reading at whatever age you are. Does that work?
Yes, ma'am. I must say that the interaction was really insightful. And I would like to start with a question that has been in my mind. So I happened to come across one of your YouTube interviews, and there you've said that you've also introduced merchandise of characters for readers.
That's
so
right.
What was the motive behind that initiative?
Okay, so sometimes when we come up with characters for our stories, like today, so many of your children spoke about the clown, right? The clown is a character. Sometimes it's nice to bring that character to life, and so that he or she, or whatever, even if it's an animal, can actually engage with the consumer, the reader, and the public at large. So we live in a world where now a story can be defined in any way. So maybe in the earlier generations, it used to be in the pages of a book, but today there's so much of technology. So it could be in any digital platform. It could also be through merchandising in the form of characters. It could be through visual merchandising. It could be through any way you want to engage with that character or situations. So which is why I thought, even if you're say having gift paper, so that's one of my merchandise options. You can order gift paper. You can order the usual things like, like breakfast bowls, cushion covers, lampshades, all those things. So, the world is now your oyster, and I want to open that up for storytellers as yet another way of engaging. Did that answer your question, madam?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I must say it is a great idea in today's world.
That's right. Because, touch point engagements are changing, and we have to also move with the times, whatever the new media is. If we can employ that, it'll be great.
Hi, ma'am. So I'm really curious to know, what is the reason behind naming your publishing house Timbuktu?
So, Shaurya, if you check out my website, I've given like a full-on explanation for that, which is, I don't know about your generation, may not be so much, but in my generation, we used to, when someone disappears for a long time or goes off on a long journey, we say, oh, he's gone off to Timbuktu. Or where were you? Had you gone to Timbuktu? So it stands for something that is far away, that is remote, that is maybe sort of, you've got to go a long journey to go there. And, and that is what the imagination is about. The imagination can take you a long, long, long way. So Timbuktu stands for the imagination, something that takes you a long way and can take you places. You can interpret it in many ways.
Yes, that's actually a great idea. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You mentioned that new media has come up, and obviously a lot of kids these days, they have easy access to video games and movies. So how do you think books can stay relevant when they are in such competition?
Yeah, so that's a great question. May I know your name? I can't see you for some reason.
I'm Ishwar.
Ishwar, yeah, hi. So that's a great question. So the whole thing is about how you define the story. So the moment you see the story as a narrative, and a narrative that must communicate a message and engage with an audience, then it doesn't matter what platform it is on. It can be on any platform, and I firmly believe that. Having said that, I support local booksellers. So I believe the original hard copy that you actually see in a bookstore, like a brick and mortar bookstore, is the best way of engaging with a book, because there's something sensorial about it. But it should not be, I understand there have to be other platforms also. So I think that everybody and everything can coexist. I'm not for engaging with the narrative only on digital platforms. I think you should read a book, because there's something sensorial about the feel, the touch of paper, the olfactory, it's a whole sensorial experience, the cover page, the design, the illustrations, especially picture books. But having said that, we are increasingly a mobile-centric world. So yes, nowadays there's so much, like now there are just podcast stories, there are audio stories, there are radio stories. So, keep engaging, I would say, but I personally favor the original bookshop down the road. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. To be honest, even I love the feeling of having a book in your hand and being able to smell the paper and feel the grains and all that.
Yes,
So,
yes,
thank you.
correct. Welcome.
Namaste, ma'am. My question
Namaste.
to you is what advice will you like to give writers who are working on his or her first book?
Okay, can you tell me your name, please? I
Ma'am,
can't see you.
Punya.
Punya, I can see you now. Yeah. So, Punya, I would suggest that a thing that we all do is don't judge, and don't think of the outcome. So sometimes the outcome is such that, it puts a lot of pressure on us. Like, who's going to read the book? Are they going to write? Are they going to like the book? What if they reject the book? Does this topic appeal to them? I would suggest just keep those questions just out of your mind. You have to write because there is a story in you that must be put out there, that has to be told, that has to be communicated. And you must work with that passion, that sense of conviction. All too often we are influenced by the end product. I would suggest just enjoy the process, the creative process. Yeah, that's been known to work wonders.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure we'll all take a page out of your.
Yes, you must. Okay, any other questions? There are
yes,
some.
ma'am. Aparna,
Yes,
ma'am, we have a few from our audiences who've been engaged with the session. So there's a question from Vedika who wants to know, when did you realize that you wanted to be a writer?
Fairly early on, I would say, like when I was in school itself. And also I came from a family of readers. Like I had older siblings, and that can help. So you automatically get your older siblings books, and you tend to read. You tend to read more perhaps than others. I always enjoyed books from a young age, and in school itself, I knew that I wanted to work. I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't exactly know where and how. It was only later on that I actually studied writing and studied communication, like in an overarching manner. I studied communication, and then I joined the industry. So I was working in corporate for a long time in communication. And that was a different sort of creativity. And then gradually when I started working with children and I was a creative writing facilitator, that's when I realized that this was very, very gratifying to be able to get children to think creatively and to be able to, get that spark of an idea in their mind, So that happened fairly early, but I would say that writing is a very large area. So you might indulge in different ways of writing. That doesn't matter. As long as you're reading and writing, it'll all fall into place as to what sort of writing you want to do.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. And Vedika, I'm sure you've got your answer there and you'll be inspired to read more. Adi here wants to know, what is the most important thing to keep in mind while writing a book?
Okay, so, well, first is, what do you want to write about? So as I was saying, you guys are, and I'm going to say that again, and I really mean it from the bottom of my heart, you are way, way more creative than any adult I know. So take that very, very seriously. The stories that, and I've published over I've engaged and published with over maybe 250 to 300 authors worldwide. These kind of stories I have not seen from any adult. It's so unconditioned, it's fresh. So I would suggest stick with your natural instinct, your spontaneity, the story you want to tell. Okay, and it must be yours. Don't allow any adult interference, because the world of logic will come in, the world of marketing will come in. The problems that adult writers face. What is the market? Who wants to read this book? No, you are very lucky that you're still young. So stay unconditioned and write about what is important for you to write. That's what I would suggest.
Another question from Chetna. She wants to know who's been your inspiration.
That is such a difficult question to answer. I think it would be the loads of books I read while growing up. I also enjoy cinema a lot. In fact, I studied screenwriting as well as creative writing. So those things can really open up. Nowadays, you guys are so lucky, everything is available. And so many people are offering free courses now. It does not have to be expensive or difficult to, I don't believe that education should be like exclusive and expensive. You can check out Coursera, you can check out so many colleges online. As you grow older, obviously, everything is available. So just go out and, do the courses you want to do. But more than that, before you get onto a screen, look out of your window. That's what I would say. When I was young, my window opened onto a street scene below, of houses, of people, of cows. There was a snake charmer who would come on Sundays. There was a koila dukan. You guys know what that is, right? Obviously. There was, it was just such chaos. And in that chaos, from that chaos comes creativity, because those kind of characters you will not find in a very sanitized environment. Like, today everyone lives in like these condos and gated communities. I mean, who do you see? Your opposite neighbor or another block of apartments. So that is where stories come from. Like I told you about the guy whom I saw as a very young child, maybe I was about 7 or 8. I saw this man climbing into his own apartment from the outside. And I was thinking, why would anyone do that? Okay. Any of you, the older ones, read Agatha Christie? Yeah, wow, Shaurya. I was not expecting to see a single hand raised. So Agatha Christie is a crime writer, and look at the way she uses the neighborhood. You can't get those kind of characters if you've not looked out of your window. There'll always be somebody who notices that something is not right somewhere. There's this film by Alfred Hitchcock called Rear Window, where a man realizes that he's not seen his neighbor in a long time. He only sees the spouse. And then, he's in a wheelchair. So his imagination is triggered all the time. And he says, okay, she's not around. Maybe, like she's murdered because she sees that guy digging a grave in his garden. So that is where ideas come from, guys. It's sometimes from the pages of a book. Yes, you must read. But I tell young people, whether you're on a bus to school or a train journeys or whatever it is, look outside. So that is my biggest inspiration.
Right. Thanks, ma'am. So that's mantra is that imbibe from your environment and you get your ideas. One last one, our second panelist is already here. So I'm taking on one last one, which many of our audiences would like to know. And this question comes from Rhythm. So what is the process if a student wants to get his work published? If you can answer that, touch upon that briefly, it will be really nice. Thank you.
Yes, sure. So it depends at what stage your story is at. You can contact, you can send me an email with just a couple of chapters and a synopsis, and we can take it from there. Or if you finished a book, there's no hard and fast rule about, obviously I would say the earlier the better, because I offer an end-to-end mentoring process. I work with children and authors, so I can mentor you and put you on a particular path or trajectory if you send me, like, say, a few chapters. But if you've already finished your novel, that's also not a problem. We can take a look at it together and we can work on it. But yes, it's a process of mentoring and reworking and bringing the novel to a particular stage when you want to when you want to publish it. So you must feel ready about it.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. We definitely will be approaching you somewhere in October when we have a writing project and class 9 comes up with novellas.
Nice.
So,
Oh, lovely.
we'd love to have your views on that. So surely we'll be approaching you. Thank you so much, ma'am. And over to Gurleen.
Thank you once again, ma'am. I am sure many of us are already enthused to explore new vistas of reading. We are truly grateful that you took out time for our community and enlightened us with heaps of knowledge. On behalf of the NIBS community, thank you so much for your presence. Have a good day, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Gurleen. And thank you, Jugnu ma'am, for having me on board. I would still like the students in their free time to write a reflection on the engagement they had with me today and reflect on how their stories just flowed so spontaneously. So if they can do that, I'd be happy. The 5 or 6 panelists who responded.
Surely, ma'am. In fact, due to paucity of time, I could not read out the stories which were coming up in the chat box also. So I'm going to compile them. I'm going to compile them and send them across to you. They were coming up spontaneously, and I'm going to just put them together for you and send them to you. And it has been an absolute pleasure having you with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to read through.
Sure.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Our second panelist for the day is Ms. Samita Arni. Samita ma'am started writing and illustrating her first book when she was 8. The Mahabharat, A Child's View, went on to be published in 7 language editions and has already sold over 50,000 copies. Her second book, Sita's Ramayan, a graphic novel developed in collaboration with the Patua artist Moina Chitrakar, was on the New York Times bestseller list for graphic novels. She is also the author of a spec-fic mythological thriller, The Missing Queen, along with The Prince, which is a work of historical fiction set in South India. In addition, she is a script writer for the feature film Good Morning Karachi. She teaches creative writing at the Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology. Samita ma'am has written for publications such as The Nat Geo Traveler, The Caravan, Amika, Mint Lounge at the Indian Express, in addition to being a regular columnist for The Hindu and the Bangalore Mirror. Samita ma'am was a 2014 writer in residence at the Find India Europe Foundation for New Dialogues and was awarded the 2015 Find Foundation grant, in addition to being the 2015 British Council Charles Wallace India Trust Writing Fellow at the University of Kent. We welcome you, ma'am, and are truly honored to have you with us.
Thank you so much for that, Gurleen, and it's lovely to be here as well. Thank you.
Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and great to be talking to you all today. So I thought I'll just take you through a little bit of my work and what got me started writing, and hopefully also maybe get you started to think about why you read and what kind of things you'd like to write. So if I may start with just a short presentation, I'm just going to share my screen and let's see how this works. Okay. Is this working?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Oh, great, great. Okay. So these are my 4 books, which Gurleen mentioned, and I started writing, as you know, very young, at the age of 8. And I'll show you a little bit of what that book looks like. I wrote and illustrated it. It was a retelling of the Mahabharata. And it looked like this. And when I started writing, I had no intention of it being a book. I was writing for myself, actually, in many ways. And one of the reasons that I was writing for myself is that I think that stories sometimes give us the possibility of understanding where we are in the world. And that's the greatest gift that reading and stories, in my opinion, can give us. They can help us understand the world we're living in. They can help us understand the situations we're living in, because sometimes things are too complicated to be expressed in one sentence or one word. They need a whole large giant epic like the Mahabharata to be explained. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of what was happening to me at the age of 8 when I started writing this book. When I was 5, my family moved to Pakistan. And my father was working with the Indian Foreign Service. So he was posted to work at the Indian consulate in Karachi, Pakistan. And so at age 5, I moved to Karachi with my family, Indian kid, Indian passport, and went to a Pakistani school. And it was a very, as you know, being an Indian in Pakistan, and this was back in '89, and it still is today, there's a fraught situation between these two countries. And you feel a little bit like you are a character in the Mahabharata. So for me, when I started reading the Mahabharata, it so much kind of explained my life to me. To me, India and Pakistan were very much like two siblings or two sides of the same family caught in a conflict. And as we know, the Mahabharata, I hope most of you are familiar with it, is the story of the Pandavas and the Kauravas, two sets of cousins who are engaged in a conflict over who should inherit the kingdom. And they fight this giant battle, and many people die as a result of this conflict. And to me, being an Indian, living in Pakistan was very much like being caught in that conflict. I went to a Pakistani school. I made Pakistani friends. I was very aware of the fact that I was Indian, and I knew that it is a complicated thing to be an Indian living in Pakistan. So for very many years, my family, we were there for 3 years. It was very tense. And my mother would always talk about the time when we'd finally go back to India and we'd feel less stressed. She'd feel freer to go about in her own country because, there were certain restrictions and regulations. We couldn't go out everywhere. There were safety issues. And when I was about, I think 6 years old, the house next to mine was bombed. A classmate of mine in Karachi, when I was going to school, got kidnapped. All of these things used to happen. So I used to feel very unsafe, a little bit like in a constant state of tension. And when I came back to India when I was 8, and it was in 1992, and it was around the time of Babri Masjid. So came back to India thinking, my mother was, it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. We're going to go home. We're going to go home finally after 3 years here. But it wasn't like that. I came back to India and I went to a school in Delhi, actually, where all of you guys are from. And the first thing that happened, the first question any new kid gets asked in a school is, where are you from? Or where have you just come from? So I said, I've just come from Karachi, Pakistan. And because I responded like that, everyone thought I was Pakistani. And since this was happening in '92, tensions were high. There was a lot of Hindu-Muslim, that was being blown up in the news all the time. And so no one would be my friend because they thought I was Pakistani. And they, got bullied a lot, got a horrible nickname, which if you want, you can ask me in the questions what my horrible nickname was, and I'll tell you. And I suddenly felt very confused. I thought I was coming home. And this wasn't the reception that I expected. And in fact, I had no friends, and I very much missed my friends in Pakistan who knew I was Indian, but were still friends with me. And then it was that time, I was 8 years old, that I really started to feel the Mahabharata spoke to my life. And I would go back home every day after school, and I would read and reread this story. And I started to write it as well, because it became my story. The character that I identified most with, for those of you who are familiar, was the character of Karna. I very much felt like Karna. I was born a Pandava, but it was only the Kauravas who would be my friend. You can understand the parallel. I was born an Indian, but my only friends were the Pakistanis because the Indians didn't see me as an Indian. And to me, then the Mahabharata really became a story, not just that could have happened or that was a myth or an epic, but it was a story that explained what happened in my life right then, and what was happening in the world also right then for me, and what also the consequences of conflict can be. So that's when I really started to feel that myths and epics are not just about times past or times that could have been, but they are more than anything else. What we read, the stories that we connect with in some way can reveal or mirror or reflect the world that we're living in. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but does it? So I would like to take this opportunity just to do a short exercise with you. If you can think of a story that you've read and that really, really spoke to you, just take 2 minutes to write down, and I'd like to hear this in the Q&A later on. What character, what story really resonates with you, and what connections or parallels can you find with your own life in that? So just, if you've got a pen and paper out, just write that down and just think about what stories or characters that might be. And the reason I'm asking to do this is because I think the power of reading is not just about expanding our minds and knowing the world around us. It is also traveling inward and understanding ourselves and where we've come from. And in that knowledge is invaluable and priceless, because nobody else in the world can know you quite the way you know yourself. And books can be a guide to that inner knowing. So here's what that book looked like. That book I started writing it when I was 8. It got published when I was 12. I didn't quite expect it to be published. And it was quite a surprise that it did. I was writing it sort of partly, I started off by telling my grandmother the story just to kind of get it out of me. But over time, and coming back home, no friends to play with, nothing to do, very bored, I started spending more and more time doing this and crafting this and illustrating it. And at some point, my family moved from Delhi to Chennai, and I was around 10 at that point. And somebody came in to visit my parents. And this lady, who was a friend of my mother, saw me writing and drawing all of these pictures. And then she told my mother, "I think your daughter has a book." So my mother was like, maybe she does. And she packed up everything that I had written, and I used to write on little bits of paper, and it was all over the place in little diaries, on the backs of postcards that draw pictures. And my mother collected it in a box, and we went to see this publisher who was a friend of her friend. The publisher looked at it, and she had just started a publishing house, and she said, "It's interesting, and if your daughter finishes this, I'll publish it." Believe me, it's never quite that easy to get published. That was the first and the last time that it was that easy. I have published 3 books since, and it has not been quite the same. And I have met many writers who have told me that that's not the way it happens. So I was very lucky with that. And so that book came out when I was 12. And for some reason, it was really popular. It got translated into 8 languages. It's still in print. People still read it. And I hate to say this, it's the most successful book I've written. I'm 37 now, and that was 25 years ago. And I've written 3 books since, and it's still my most successful book, is the book that I've written when I was 12. So if any of you are here, write your first book now, start writing, because it might be your most successful book, and it might be this runaway success. So you better start writing now. This is what it looked like. As you can see, I've kind of inserted my own world into it. This is the part where Duryodhana comes to Krishna to ask for help in the war, and Duryodhana is sitting by the Krishna's head, and Arjuna has also come and is sitting by Krishna's feet. And I decided to give Krishna the same pajamas, the same bed sheet. I had a bed sheet that had lots of hearts on it that I had. I also had a fan that was positioned next to my bed. But obviously, how do you have fans operating at that time? So there's a little guy over there who's cycling away to keep that fan going. So I used to also throw in, I was 9, 10 when I drew this picture. So I used to put in my own world into these pictures as well. So that was my first book. And at the age of 12, if you asked me what I'd wanted to be, I would have told you I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I had no intention of writing another book, because while I had written this book at 12, it was a lot of work also to write a book. I was like, I don't want to do that kind of work again. I'm not interested in writing. And later on, because of my father had this diplomatic job, I traveled. We went to Thailand. And before Pakistan, we had been in Indonesia. And I think this is in some ways what shaped me to my second book, and my second and third book, which are based on the Ramayana. This is a picture from Thailand's airport right now. Thailand's airport is called, this was Suvarnabhumi Airport, I think, and Suvarnabhumi is a Sanskrit term. And this is in, I hope, give you a minute to guess where this is an episode from an Indian, from mythology, Hindu mythology that you might be familiar with. It is the churning of the ocean. You can see there is a great serpent and Asuras and Devas. I think this is the Asura side, and this is a sculpture that lies in the middle of in Suvarnabhumi Airport in Thailand, in Bangkok. And you go to India. So Thailand is a Buddhist country, but there's a Ramayana. They have a very strong connection to the Ramayana. Every king is called King Rama 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're currently at King Rama 10. So Thailand, Buddhist country, has a strong Ramayana tradition. They have a Ramayana and they call it the Ramakien. The first the Ramayana that I came across with was actually when I was at the age of 2, when I was living in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a Muslim country, but it has a strong tradition of Ramayana performances. And they do these beautiful shadow puppet performances called the Bayang Kulit. So in Indonesia, I also saw the Ramayana. In Thailand, I saw the Ramayana. And then as I traveled around Southeast Asia, this is an image from Cambodia and Angkor Wat. This is an image from the Mahabharata, the death of Bhishma in the Mahabharata. That all of these countries, all of these cultures outside of India also have a connection to these epics. And here is an image of a monkey. And I think it is, and here's another one as well. And this is from Taiwan. And this is a monkey character that actually is not exactly from the Ramayana, but it is inspired by the Ramayana. So the story, what scholars think is that the story of the Ramayana traveled on by traders, was taken on the Silk Route, and it inspired a new story. And it is the story of the monkey king Sun Wukong in the Chinese epic, which comes in the 14th century, called Journey to the West. And it's about a naughty monkey king. And guess who inspired that? Hanuman. If any of you guys have seen Dragon Ball Z or are fans of Dragon Ball Z, the character of Goku is inspired by Sun Wukong, and Sun Wukong in turn is inspired by the Hanuman. So there's a complicated connection from the Ramayana to Dragon Ball Z. So I was really curious. I kind of grew up with this understanding of how stories traveled and evolved and shaped over time and influenced other stories, and how stories would sometimes migrate or travel to other parts of the world and shift in the retelling. But and so that kind of led me to thinking a lot about the Ramayana. And when I came back to India much, much later, after having lived in Thailand, and then I lived in Italy, and then I lived in the US, and I came back to India when I was 22, it was a very different kind of an experience for me coming back, because the Ramayana was still very important. And we still live with this understanding of the Ramayana. When the lockdown happened, there were all of these references to the Agni Pariksha, because we all had to stay at home. The Lakshman Rekha, because we all had to sort of stay at home in our houses. So we're still thinking in terms of the Ramayana, in terms of these ideas, so that even though it's a story that's very old and very ancient, it's something that's still very much part of our minds, for better and for worse. So something that had always troubled me as I had dealt with the Ramayana, and it's such a powerful story. It's traveled to so many countries. It's influenced so many cultures. But what had always sort of troubled me was the treatment of Sita, because this was not, the Sita that I had sort of watched on the television Ramayana, on I don't know if you guys, see Doordarshan anymore, but I used to, when I was growing up in India, I used to watch Doordarshan, and I watched this Ramayana come on television. And it was a Ramayana where Sita sort of always followed Ram, and she was very submissive, and she was very quiet, and she was she had this hard time, and she couldn't step out of this Lakshman Rekha, and then everyone blamed her when she did that, and then she had to go and have this difficult time in Lanka, and then finally when Ram came and took her back, there was no place for her also in Ayodhya, and she was banished to the forest. I was very uncomfortable with this, because I grew up with that tradition of saying, oh, you should be like like Sita, but I didn't want to be a Sita. I didn't want to stay in an Agni, in a Lakshman Rekha. I didn't want to have to go through an Agni Pariksha myself. So it was, I was very confused about this. And that was when I started coming across the fact that there were other Ramayanas. And some of these Ramayanas were written by women. Some of these Ramayanas were written by and told by other communities. And these Ramayanas actually had the same issues that I did. And one of these Ramayanas is the Patua Ramayana. And the Patua Ramayana is told by the Chitrakas, the Patuas who live in Bengal. They lived in Nirbepur is the village that Moina, and you can see her in this picture, comes from. And she travels with these giant scrolls. As you can see, the scrolls are behind us in this picture, from village to village. And they sing this Ramayana, traveling from village to village. And it's a Ramayana that's very, can you hear this? I like to share a little bit of what she's singing to you. So if you can't hear this, please let me know.
Actually, you have to share sound.
Okay, let me see if I can share sound. Okay, yes.
आगे चले रामचंद्र पुस्तके जानकी ताहार पुस्तके चले लखन जानकी ऊपरेर रविरता नीचे तपोबाली আর চলিতে না পারে সীতা ননির তুলি ভাঙিল গো তরুণ ডাল লক্ষণ ধরে শিরে কেরু অবচাইল কি চলো ধীরে ধীরে পঞ্চবতীর বনে রাম তুলিল হাওয়ালি রাম.
Okay, so I just want to share you a little bit of that. But it was, when I came across that, I came to, and this is just an example of another kind of a song or a text that describes the kind of songs that they're singing. And this is, it's a different Ramayana because it really presents Sita's point of view. And that's the Patua Ramayana, but there are many Ramayanas that are kind of similar and share something like that. This is from Maharashtra, and this is also sung by women. And it goes, I have no father, no mother. I have lived my life in forests, eating wild fruits. I have no sister, no brother. My soul has become an exile living in the wilderness. So this is a very different kind of an idea of Sita. That was really something that was very different from what I had grown up with. And the Patua Ramayana begins this way, with Sita having been banished to the forest. And as you can see in this image, Sita is crying. She has been abandoned and she's left in this forest and she's heavily pregnant. And that's where the story starts from. And the reason the Patuas identify with this is because they're also, they're Dalits, they're the bottom of the caste system. And very much like they are illiterate. They are also kind of abandoned by the system. So in many ways, they kind of see a reflection of themselves in Sita, who is abandoned and has to handle herself and has to manage her own kind of life and has to raise 2 children in the forest. And suddenly when I read this and I encountered this, my image of Sita changed. I think she became something like a kind of a hero for me because she had gone through a tough time. But she managed to go into the forest, learn to deal with that fear at the end. It takes a lot of integrity. It takes a lot of courage to be her. She doesn't know, and that was a huge turning point for me, looking at the Ramayana. And so that led to sort of Sita's Ramayana. And Moina and I worked on this, and it took a long time for us to put it together because first the images came because they were Moina's images, and I had to write the text to suit the images. So really, I think she's the primary storyteller here, and I'm the second person in it. But as you can see, we had to adapt the scroll to something like a graphic novel format. And initially, we weren't sure we were going to do that. We thought maybe it makes sense to do it like an illustrated novel or something like that. But I felt that a graphic novel would really speak to, I wanted young girls to read this, and I felt like a graphic novel would be something that they're familiar with, would come into contact, would be something that they would resonate with. So then we decided to do it in this way. And it was quite hard actually to figure it out. I love this image because this is the image of the Lakshman Rekha that Moina has drawn. And Moina didn't have to say anything, but she drew Sita with these bars across her face to give us a feeling of what Sita felt like, even in that moment, and what she thought Sita felt like in that moment. And I think that's very powerful. So just to give you a sense of what the book looks like, I think it's beautiful images that Moina has drawn. Sometimes we had to introduce new characters as well, because one thing when you're telling the Ramayana from an oral point, in an oral kind of a tradition, singing it, you can sort of, escape, like go through long parts of it, or you don't always have to be consistent. You can switch character voices. So the Patua Ramayana does that a lot. The thing is, one of the most important parts of the Ramayana is the war, but we don't actually see the war through Sita's eyes, though the Patua Ramayana starts with Sita's point of view. And I wanted to preserve that in the book. So in the Patua Ramayana, sometimes they'll shift to another character's point of view, like Hanuman's point of view. This is how Hanuman saw the war happening. And I thought I'd like to really preserve Sita's point of view. So how does Sita know what's happening in the war? And I had to go to another Ramayana to find out a way of doing that. And I went to the Tamil Ramayana, the Kamba Ramayana, where there is a wonderful character called Srijata, who's actually Vibhishana's daughter. And she has the power to see into the future and into the past and into everything at once. She has the power to know what's going to happen in the future. And she's the one who is also Sita's jailer in the Ashokavana. So it is Srijata in the Tamil Ramayana who tells Sita, don't worry, your husband Ram will come for you and he will rescue you. She says all of those sorts of things. And she becomes Sita's best friend, even though she is a Rakshasi and she lives in Lanka and she's Vibhishana's daughter. And then another interesting point comes for Srijata, when her father Vibhishana decides to go over to Ram's side. Srijata says, he comes to Srijata and he says, you come with me, you come over to Ram's side. And Srijata says, no, I'm not coming with you. I'm going to stay here in Lanka. Because these are my people and Sita is also here and I'm her friend. And this is where I'm supposed to be. So there you have father and daughter kind of on opposite sides. And it's really interesting, the choices that they make. So I really found her character, Srijata, quite interesting. So this is just to show you a few more images from what Sita's Ramayana looked like. And this is how it ends, with Sita going back into the earth as well. And I'd like to hear from you in the Q&A. Well, how do you understand this also? Because when I was young, sometimes the Ramayana I was told ended with Ram and Sita going back to Ayodhya and doesn't mention anything afterwards. But the Valmiki Ramayana and many Ramayanas like the Patua Ramayana include this part where Ram and Sita meet after she's been banished and after she's had love and kush in the forest. And then Ram says, come back to Ayodhya. And Sita says, no, I'm not coming back to Ayodhya. I'm going to go back to the earth, my mother. So I really want to also understand from you what you think about that as well. I'd love to hear that in the Q&A. And so that's a little bit of my writing journey. I wanted to share a few more things, but I don't know if I'll entirely have time, but I thought I'll just, come back to this point that we have in India particularly, sometimes it's confusing because we have multiple versions of the same story. We have multiple versions of the Mahabharata, we have multiple versions of the Ramayana. But I think stories also change and they shift and they have to be retold time and time again to suit the culture and the time that we're living in. Just as the Patua tradition is beautiful, but maybe it has to be adapted into a graphic novel format for all of us to really engage with it. So I think sometimes stories have to shift and transform, and sometimes they cross borders. And what can we add from our end when we're retelling these stories? Do we put ourselves, to make it really resonate with an audience, do you help reflect the situation that we're in? Just like in the beginning when I talked about how the Mahabharata spoke to me, because it's kind of spoke to every experience of conflict, to the conflict between India and Pakistan. Is that also the power of such stories, that they reflect the situations we're in across time? So I'd like to leave that also for you to tell me what you think at the end of this. But one of the things is that I sometimes feel, particularly in India, we're obsessed with the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and sometimes we don't realize that there are many other stories out there. And one of the stories that I find really fascinating, and this has led to my last book, which is called The Prince, is the story of the Silapatikaram, and it comes from Tamil Nadu. And for me, it's really interesting because the Mahabharata and the Ramayana sometimes seem to me as stories of kings who go to war or princes who go to war. Yes, we have female characters like Draupadi and Sita, and I really tried in my work to kind of bring out Sita's point of view. But these are on some level, all the action is happening with men. And that's when I found the Silapatikaram really interesting, because it centers around a female character. And here's a picture of her. This is Kannagi. I mean, it's a picture of a statue that was built in the 20th century. And if you ever go to Chennai, you can see the statue. It's by Marina Beach. And it's a statue of Kannagi, who becomes a really popular character. Everyone in Tamil Nadu knows of her. And because she is a woman who is an ordinary woman, she's a merchant's wife. And when her husband is unjustly killed, she goes and challenges the king and demands justice. And this is a story where a woman is a hero. So I was an ordinary woman, not a princess, not a king. This is an ordinary woman who is the hero of the story. So I became really interested in the story. And this is, ma'am had also asked me to talk about my process. I do a lot of research as well when I write a book. So I went to the place where the story comes from. The Kannagi is supposed to come from a city called, which is now a village in Tamil Nadu called Pumpuhar, which is right by the sea. And in ancient times, Pumpuhar was a port, and ships from Rome and Greece would come here. But this is what it looks like now. This is what the beach at Pumpuhar looks like. And I was really struck when I was here because there's another very famous story called Manimekalai, which is set in the same city, Pumpuhar. And it's a story of Kannagi's sort of a daughter called Manimekalai. And it's a story where the sea comes and consumes the city of Pumpuhar. And considering that I was doing this after the tsunami, about 10 years after the tsunami, it seemed like a story that also spoke to our time. It spoke to about what still happens. In Manimekalai, a tsunami comes and consumes the village, in the city. We are still seeing that thousands of years later. It is a story also about women asking for justice. Manimekalai is a dancer and she is in conflict with the king and the queen again in the story. So I found that there were many resonances with the story, even in our time. So one of the things I'm trying to do is retell these stories so that it becomes accessible and popular, and to also make it more than just the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. There are many other stories that we've inherited that also speak to our times. And this is the temple of Madurai Meenakshi. The story of the Silapatikaram is also set partly in Madurai. So this is part of the research I went, and you can see the number of women there. This story is really important to them because it also, and Madurai Meenakshi is really important to them because it's a goddess who's a very powerful woman. So this led to the book, The Prince, and that is how that happened. And you might be asking, why is it called The Prince when you've just been talking about women? Well, actually the Silapatikaram, which has all of these powerful women, so also the Manimekalai, were written by men. And in this story, the very interesting thing about the Silapatikaram and Kannagi is that it's a story of a common woman who challenges a king. Ironically, the story is written by a prince. So it seemed to me so interesting that 2000 years ago, a prince, and we know that he was a real prince, wrote this story about a common woman. And this prince, he could have been a king, but kind of like a Buddha, he gave up his claim to the kingship in favor of his brother. and instead of and chose to become a monk. So and a monk who wrote a very famous epic about a woman, and the first Tamil epic, the first major Tamil epic. So this book is about him. In case you're interested in ever reading it. And so that is also my process, and that's what interests me, is why do we retell these stories? Why were these stories important? Why have they become important over time? And I think that's also what makes me, anything that I read, that is what engages me with it. How does it speak to me? How does it speak to the time that it was written? Why did the author choose to write it that way? Those are some of the questions that when I'm particularly doing my research, I'm trying to find something to write about, and another epic to retell. Those are the questions that interest me. So that's enough about me, I guess. And I've realized I was asked to speak for about 35 minutes before opening up for questions. So I think it's just 36 right now. So thank you so much for listening to me, and over to you, Gurleen. I'm just going to stop the share.
Definitely, ma'am. I must say that it was truly a captivating and delightful session. And now we have a few questions pouring in from a young audience, the students of grades 7 and 8. And now we open the forum to them.
Namaste, ma'am. I am Lipi from grade 8, and I have read your book, The Mahabharata, A Child's View. Such epics have always had this typical style of narration, but authors are now exploring many innovative narratives. What are your views on this trend?
I think it's great. But I think that's also been in the past. There are many different kinds of Mahabharats and that have been written in times past. One of the most interesting ones that I came across recently, I think, was written in the 7th or 8th century. It's called the Kirata Arjunaya, and it's a very important literary text because it also changes the way audiences previously had seen the Mahabharata. It focuses on Arjuna, and it focuses on Arjuna as a kind of a warrior ascetic, and it becomes very important because it's patronized by a particular king whose poet is also telling him, be like this warrior ascetic. And this version of the Kirata Arjunaya is a text that travels, and it goes leaves India and it goes to Indonesia, where it's picked up by the kings, the Rajas of Bali, and the poets there tell it in a way that also makes this become a very important text for how kings are perceived in Southeast Asia as sort of these warrior ascetics who are like Arjuna. And it's because, sometimes a lot before that, it was always about the Ramayana and Ram being the ideal king, but now you have Arjuna being a kind of a model for a king. So these stories have changed over times as well. You have many different kinds of innovations. You have, like, for example, I showed you the Patua Ramayana, which is a version that's told in scrolls and in visual format. So this has always been happening, and what I see happening now is just a continuation of that old trend. And it's great that that's happening. Yeah.
That's surely insightful.
Thank you.
Namaste, ma'am. Yes, I am Kabir from grade 8. So I would like to ask you, so you are best known for your adaptations of the Indian epic poetry. So how did you get the idea of exploring adaptations of Indian epics?
As I mentioned in my talk, it was because these epics kind of resonated with my own life, because I saw the Mahabharata having a reflection or a parallel or showing a mirror to my own life. And years later, I saw the Ramayana, the way the Patua tradition retold the Ramayana, kind of voicing the same questions I had about the Ramayana. So that was really why I feel that I'm attracted to telling adaptations. But I also think that these stories have been so important for how culture has shaped over time, across millennia. So that's also, I think, important for us to understand. That's what makes me keep going with this. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, that was a totally different perspective.
Thank you. You're welcome to disagree with me.
Namaste, ma'am. My name is Zenia. I'm from class 7th. Ma'am, you explore many characters from Sangam literature, but unfortunately, Indian vernacular literature is not very popular. So, will it impact my reading of your books if I have no idea about Sangam literature?
You have precisely written it in a way that it should get you interested in Sangam literature. So it's a teaser. If you like The Prince, maybe you'd be interested in to go more and read the literature and the history of that time. So yeah, you should be able to read it, even if not.
Thank you, ma'am.
Namaste, ma'am. I'm Abhimanyu from grade 8. Ma'am, my question is that in one of your interviews, you have said that looking at the Ramayana from Sita's point of view was a very difficult task. Can you please elaborate on that?
I said that? I didn't remember saying that. Apologies. I think it's not difficult. I think writing this book in many ways was difficult. It had to go back and forth to make it work. It had to kind of adapt it to a graphic novel format, to bring in different other characters sometimes, like we had to bring in Srijatha to fill a hole in the narrative. So that was very challenging about it. But also to kind of, I guess, when you're writing something, sometimes you have to place yourself in the place of that character and see the world through their eyes. And I think there had been a block for me to do that with Sita, because this was not a character I wanted to be. I didn't want Sita's fate to happen to me. I don't want to be there in an Lakshmi Rekha. I don't want to have to go through an Agni Pariksha. But then sometimes when you do that, I realized like Sita had to be really strong in order to have gone through all that. Or at the end of it, she had become a very strong person. So I think that was the realization that came out of that.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope that was really inspirational for everyone. And that's a really nice way to look at it.
Thank you.
Namaste, ma'am. I'm Catherine from grade 8. So, ma'am, your collaboration with Patua artist Moina Chitrakar also brings this traditional art to the fore. Do you think that somewhere you had that small intention of making this art famous amongst people?
I think I thought it was beautiful. Wasn't sure that Sita Ramayana went on to get on the New York Times bestseller list and all. I had no idea that was going to happen. I had no idea it would be famous either. It's become a lot of people have read it. A lot of people write to me all the time because they've read it. I didn't think it was going to do that. I didn't imagine it would do that.
Well, ma'am, I'm sure after reading your books, many people will get to know about Patua art and more about Ramayana from Sita's point of view.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I happened to read your article in The Hindu in which you spoke about your personal multi-faith mythology. Could you please shed more light on this term and how it was coined and all of that?
Oh, yeah, multi-faith mythology. One of the people I most admire actually is Mahendravarman Pallava. And he comes from the 6th century. And he also comes kind of from a multi-faith family. So he becomes a Shaivite, but his grandfather is, his father, Simha Vishnu, is Jain. One of his grandmothers is Buddhist. So, when we talk today, you're Hindu or you're Muslim or whatever, there's some aspect of our country that has always been deeply secular, deeply plural. Like even in the time of Mahendravarman Pallava, you see that people are fighting, communities are fighting, the Jains and the Buddhists and the Hindus and all are fighting, but they can still have the same three faiths in one family. And I also come from a family like that. I have a multi-faith family. I have cousins who are Christian and I have cousins who are Muslim. And for me, then I think it was really important for us to kind of see ourselves as, one continuation, not different cultures or not different things. And I grew up also in that way. I grew up in Indonesia, which is a Muslim country, but has, the Ramayana is so important. I grew up in Thailand, which is a Buddhist country, but the Ramayana is so important. I grew up in Karachi, where the city of Lahore is actually named after, Prince Lava. Lahore comes from Lavapuri. That's how the word comes. So we are not, it is kind of amazing that these things we can coexist. And there are parts of those mythologies that are, have influenced ours as well. They say that the actual earliest recorded Ramayana might actually be a Jain or a Buddhist Ramayana. So who's to say where it comes from or what? That's what scholars say. So might be true, might not be true. But I think for myself, I would like to take bits and pieces of different mythologies, like the story of Madholal Hussain, the sort of Hindu Muslim saint who comes from Lahore. Or there are many moments like that of crossover moments. And I think those really touch me and those really speak to me, because I think there are parts of all of these stories that are really useful to us. The Arabian Nights is one of my favorite texts, and it is about how you can change a king through gentleness and through love. A very cruel king, and in Shahrazad, who's his wife, changes him with the story she tells into becoming a gentle, loving king. So I think that's also a really powerful story, and that's something that, regardless of which faith I'm coming from, I think that's an important story to have.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really eye-opening.
Yes, ma'am. So I would like to ask you, what is your most favorite part of the Mahabharata?
Oh, good question. I think it changes. So the answer for this keeps changing. When I was writing this, I would have probably said my favorite character or something like that is Karna. But now my favorite part of the Mahabharata is the beginning, which is actually the end. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but the story actually starts with Janamejaya, who's the son of Parikshit. And Janamejaya, Parikshit, if you guys remember, is Abhimanyu's son. Abhimanyu is Arjuna's son, and Parikshit sort of grown up alone. After he's born, when he's born, his father is already dead. And his grandfathers, the Pandavas, are still alive, and he inherits the kingdom after them. And he goes hunting one day, and he accidentally he's very thirsty, and he sees the sage, and the sage is meditating. And Parikshit says, do you know where there's any water? And the sage is meditating and doesn't answer. In tapas doesn't answer. So Parikshit gets really upset, and he sees a dead snake lying around. So he takes the dead snake and he garlands this sage with the dead snake and walks off. And the son of the sage comes, and he's really upset. Like, look, who's put this dead snake on my dad? This is bad. I'm going to curse the person who did this. May whoever did this be killed by a snake. And so then Parikshit is cursed to be killed by a snake. And then, he's like, oh, no. And then he goes back to the sage and he apologizes. And the sage says, actually, I was meditating, so I didn't really notice. And then the sage calls his son and he says, why did you do this? And the son was like, well, he insulted you. And the sage was like, yeah, but he's, try to think of forgiveness. So but the son can't take back the curse. So he says, okay, I'll restrict the curse to a week. If Parikshit gets out of these few days alive, then, and no snake kills him, he's sorted, he won't die. But then what happens is somebody else hears of this curse, and somebody else is determined to take revenge. And that person, or that thing, is Takshaka. Anybody heard of Takshaka? Anyone know who Takshaka is? No. So Takshaka is a character who appears earlier on in the Mahabharata, and he is a Naga king. And remember that Arjuna and the Pandavas were given the Khandava forest, and they burn down the forest and they build Indraprastha. Well, when they burn down the forest, they burn everything that's in the forest. And one of the things that's in the forest is Takshaka's wife and son. So Takshaka's wife, Naga queen, Takshaka's son, and Takshaka. So the son, the wife says, "Run away, son, and I'll try to stop the fire. I'll keep Agni back, and you escape." So the son escapes, but the mother dies in the fire. So the son, Ashwasena, gets really, really angry, and when the Kurukshetra war happens, Ashwasena goes and he tells Karna, "Let me sit on your astra, and I will kill Arjuna because he killed my mother." He said he let Agni eat the entire forest. Because of him, my mother died. And he's sitting on the, but Karna says, no, I can do this on my own. But anyway, Ashwasena comes and he jumps on the astra, but the astra misses. I think it hits the crown. I can check it up. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it hits the crown and Arjuna is saved and Ashwasena is killed. And then Takshaka is really upset now because he's lost his wife and he's lost his son. And he's waiting for his revenge. So when he hears that this curse has come and Parikshit is Arjuna's grandson, I will take my revenge. I will avenge the death of my son and my wife. So he goes and he hides himself in a fruit that's given to Parikshit as the day ends. And Parikshit takes a bite of the fruit and suddenly this little worm comes out and then it transforms into this giant snake and it is Takshaka, and Takshaka bites Parikshit and kills him. And now Janamejaya, the son of Parikshit who becomes king, guess what he feels? Any guesses? He feels angry. And just like Takshaka was angry because his wife and son were killed, Janamejaya is also angry because his father has been killed. So he says, I am going to kill every single Naga. I'm going to make a great snake sacrifice and I'm going to destroy every Naga to avenge my father's death. So he goes off to Takshashila to kill Takshaka. And then he gets all his priests and everybody there and they're calling all these mantras and all these snakes are coming out of the city of Takshashila and they're falling into this fire. And then suddenly Takshaka is also pulled out and he's trying to resist the power of all of these mantras, but suddenly everything freezes. And it freezes because a little boy comes out and this little boy is half Naga, half human. His name is Astika. And only he has the power because he's born of a Naga mother and a human father, a father who was a sage, that he can stop this sacrifice. He has the power, the ability to stop the sacrifice. And because he's seeing his grandfather being pulled, he stops the sacrifice. And it's that Janamejaya is really frustrated. He says, no, the sacrifice must continue. And Astika is like, no, I won't let you kill my grandfather. And Janamejaya is like, no, your grandfather killed my father. And then Astika is like, well, your grandfather killed my great-grandmother and my great-grand-uncle. And this goes on for a while and then no one knows what they're talking about. Janamejaya doesn't know the story as well. He doesn't know that this is the reason that Takshaka was trying to kill his father. And then suddenly this is when Vyasa comes. And Vyasa comes with his disciple called Vaisampayana. And they come in the middle of the sacrifice and they tell Janamejaya the story of his ancestors, the story of the Mahabharata, the story of what all happened in the Mahabharata. And it is through hearing all of those stories that all the emotions, all the anger, all the desire for revenge becomes Shanti, becomes resolved in Janamejaya, in Takshaka, in Astika, all of that. And so at the end of it, Janamejaya says, releases everyone. Takshaka is still alive. And he invites Astika to become his friend and come back to the court of Hastinapura and be his advisor. And that's my favorite part of the Mahabharata, because it is the power of a story to transform two people who were enemies, to make them see their shared history, to end this conflict, to end the war, and make them come together. That for me is the most powerful part of the Mahabharata.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really interesting.
Ma'am, it's actually really impressive that you know the Ramayana so well, like you know everything about it and you could explain it so detailedly.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's really kind of you to say.
Ma'am, also there's another question. So since you spent a lot of your time in Pakistan, so did that influence your writing?
Yeah. I think what a storyteller can do, what a writer can do, show you the world from a different point of view. And like Vyasa does, he's telling Janamejaya and Astika the story. They're both listening to the story of what happened. He changes their perspective, and that perspective shift changes the world afterwards. So I think I'm not that great a storyteller, but I think that could be the power of stories, that they make you see the world through the eyes of another person, through the eyes of another character. And that can shift your reality, that can shift the way you act in the future.
Yes, ma'am. I must say that that is very true. And I'm just in awe of how rich our great epics are, because the way you've narrated, you say that you're not a good storyteller, but I was not aware of this part of the Mahabharata. And you told me, and I was like, oh my God, because usually what happens is that the Mahabharata stops when the Pandavas die. I've never heard this point of view. And I must say that that is really new information. And so, ma'am, in the beginning, you were asking us about some stories and how do we connect with them to our life. So, in that, a story came to my mind. So, it has been authored by Sudha Murthy. Like, you must be knowing her. Yes. So, she wrote in one of her books that she was touring a village and she went to one of the houses and like she was the guest there, but the family was not able to provide her milk, like just a simple thing as milk. So that is the day she stopped drinking milk at all, because such a thing is a luxury for some people. And I think that we might take a lot of things for granted, but we should definitely not do that. And when you asked about that question, that story just came up to my mind. So I thought I'll share that with you. And thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Gurleen. I'm also curious to hear if any of the rest of you had any stories or characters that came to mind.
I didn't have any stories or characters, but I must say you claimed that you are not a great storyteller, but then just spontaneously, when you are asked to talk about one part of the Mahabharata, you're able to narrate it so beautifully that it just had me engaged throughout. So I think you are a fantastic storyteller, and I think that's why you are so successful.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind of you. Thank you. And anybody else with any of their favorite stories or characters that they like? Any of you want to be writers, or what are you reading currently? Yes, Kabir.
Yeah, so I am basically reading Alive, the story of the Andes survivors. So basically it has 60 people who were like, they were rugby players. Some of them were rugby players and others were like relatives of them. So they basically have to go to Chile for a match, but their plane crashes at the Argentinian side of the Andes mountains. And so that's how the mysteries unravel of those struggles they face to like live alive. Yeah.
Wow.
To stay alive.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, really much.
Great. That's great. That's a great book to read. Well done. What about you, Lippy? I saw your hand up as well.
Well, I was reading, as we are doing this Get Book as an English reading project. I did happen to read as a part of it, The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank.
Oh.
Yes. So what I felt the most was in it that the power of paper and pen and what all of it can do. And it's now there out for me and you to see how it is all about the life, the Holocaust, and what the struggle was over there and what millions of people had to face, all that pain, the loss. So that really teaches us that we should be grateful for whatever we have, because it's a blessing.
Lovely book to read.
Namaste, Samita ma'am. This is Jugnu. I'm picking up the questions from the audience, and one question you've given them already. So like it's flooded with that question. You can guess which one. It's totally flooded. You gave it to them.
Oh, which one was my, yeah. You guys are right. I mean, you can also find, the horrible nickname was Pagal Pakistani. Yeah.
Yes, they some of them did fine, but most of them kind of started writing that. So I thought, right. Okay. Ma'am, another question coming up is like, what are you working on present? Tell us about your upcoming publications.
Well, I'm actually kind of shifting industries. So I'm trying to move into the film industry. So I just actually came back a few days back from Kerala, where I was working on as a script advisor on a children's fantasy film. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Kerala actors or anything, but it's being directed by Mohanlal, who's a very well-known Malayali actor. So it's been kind of fun to be there, working there, and sort of trying to make this character more contemporary, so she resonates with your age group. She would be the age of most of you in the audience. So kind of helping with that and working on that. So those are the kind of, and one other book that I'm working on is the story that I've just told all of you, which is about Astika and Janamejaya, that I'm trying to turn into a book.
So what has made you take this decision of shifting to another industry? Is
because
there, it's just fascination, or I know you've written a script for one of the movies, so you find that, more where you can kind of put in more of imagination and pour out, or why did you decide to move on to that field?
But I actually studied film. But I also, increasingly I found, and particularly I think this is true through the pandemic, that sometimes writing feels very isolated. And it gets out to a number of people, like, okay, I have a book that's considered very successful because it's reached 50,000 people, or at least 50,000 copies have been bought. And it's not about copies or anything else, but it's just that sometimes opportunities present themselves to make a bigger impact. And this came, I did not go after the film industry. The film industry came to me. And I felt that there is a possibility to change things in a bigger way there. This film will be watched by millions of young girls in Kerala. And if you present them a strong, assertive girl that can really empower them, you can create some change that way. So that's one of the reasons I decided to switch industries. I hope it's not...
Thank you. And I want to know, what do you like to do when you're not reading or writing?
Oh, and I also wanted to add one thing to the previous question, which is, I think also you work with many storytellers when you're making a film. So I am a writer, as a scriptwriter, even just as a writer, I work with a publisher and an editor. But I loved working with an artist on a graphic novel. It was like 2 + 2 = 10. And then when you're working on a film, you're working with a director of photography, you're working with a director, you're working with actors who are also storytellers of a sort. So all of those ideas come together and you feel like 2 + 2 = 40. And it can be very magical when that happens. When you are coming together to create a story, it's a very exciting feeling as a writer. It becomes much bigger than just one person. So to be part of that is great fun. Your second question is, what am I?
Yeah, this one is from Anaya. What do you like to do when you're not reading or writing?
What do I like to do? I like to play with my cats. Oh. Can I show you my cat? He's on my desk with me. If I may. I don't know, can you see him?
Yes, we can. Oh my, yes.
So I am their slave. When I'm not reading or writing, I am their slave and I have to look after them. I also teach. So I teach in schools and colleges, and and I live an ordinary life. I watch movies and have friends.
Okay, I'll take up the last two. This is interesting. What is your favorite combo with the book?
What is my favorite? I used to love drinking hot chocolate, and then I had to stop drinking hot chocolate, so I can't drink it anymore.
Okay. Okay. The last one, ma'am, one piece of advice to our young audience.
Do what you love.
Definitely. Whatever you're passionate about, do what you love. That's the message she's leaving us with. And the young audience over here will definitely identify they would love to do whatever they're passionate about. And then you can carve a niche for yourself. You can go on, and thank you, ma'am, for that. Another one, just one more interesting one that just popped up. If you could spend a day with another popular author, who would it be and why?
Who would it be? Well, actually, my best friend is also a very popular author. So I spend a lot of time with her already. because I find her like we get along very well as friends. Her name is Devi Yashodharan. She's written a book called Empire, which is quite well known and quite famous. So I spend a lot of time with her. I spend a lot of time with other writers also. So I do that already. But I guess someone I don't know, who would it be? Right now, I'm just the person who pops to mind is Hilary Mantel. She's a wonderful historical writer. She writes about historical fiction set in England. Brilliant writer. So I would just love to spend time with her to understand how she writes, because she does things with language I can't do.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure you are leaving our young ones enthralled with your presentation, with your storytelling, and the way you went into Mahabharata and how you brought in the perspective. I'm sure they are going to go on and get into it themselves, and maybe, I'm sure, I mean, honestly, when you showed those illustrations, I found them very intricate, like they were awesome. I'm sure it's very inspiring for the young ones over here, writing at the age of 8 and taking it on, and those illustrations and the way you have narrated stories to them today. I'm sure there's lots to take back. And with that, I want to thank you for being here with us. And over to Ishwar.
Thank you once again, Samita ma'am, for gracing us with your presence. It has truly been an experience we will all cherish. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It has indeed been an enriching session, leaving us a lot to mull over. We are truly indebted to you for being with us today. We hope to see more of you in person when school reopens. Thank you once again.
Thank you. And thank you for being such a wonderful audience, the questions you've asked, and the amount of research you guys did on me. Thank you so much for that. Really, really appreciate that. Wonderful question.
We sincerely hope that you as an audience enjoyed today's sessions. We hope the illustrious guests catered to your varied interests and gave you some ideas to carry back. All of us, I am sure, have been enthused to pick up a book and start reading. As Neil Gaiman said, a book is a dream you hold in your hands. The school's reading logs have a comprehensive set of titles for all ages to choose from, so pick one and get booked. Thank you for being an encouraging and supportive audience. Namaste.
Thank you.